This presentation serves as an introduction to demand and supply. Demand and supply are tools used to model a market for a particular good or service, or for a collection of goods and services. And demand and supply here is best understood in the context of a free and competitive market, which I've illustrated here, in which resource owners are free to input resources into a business activity, and then the business activity is then able to convert the resources into goods and services which it sells to the end user, the consumer. So in this illustration, we can see a market for goods and services. A market is simply where the buyers and sellers come together to trade. And so here we're illustrating the trade of goods and services for money. And on the left-hand side, we also have in this illustration a market for resources in which the sellers of resources come together with the buyers of resources, the business activity, and they're trading resources for a certain amount of money. Now, we're initially going to be looking at the market for goods and services. That's the market that we're most familiar with. When we go to Walmart, we're looking at the market for our groceries or our tennis shoes or our stereos or shampoo or what have you, or maybe a market for gasoline when we go to the gas station to get our gas. The business activity is the producer or supplier of the good or service. And over here, this little stick man is the consumer or demander of the goods or service. Let's first define demand and supply. Demand is simply the amounts of a good or service that the consumers are willing and able to purchase at various prices. So we're looking at amounts and we're looking at prices, and we're looking at amounts and connecting those amounts with various prices, the amounts of a good or service that the consumers are willing and able to purchase at various prices. While supply, we're still looking at amounts and various prices. And supply is looking at the amounts of a good or service that producers are willing and able to make available for sale. So while demand is looking at what consumers are willing and able to purchase, supply is looking at what producers are willing and able to sell at various prices. Another way we can look at demand is simply the quantities of a product offered to be purchased at various possible prices, while supply is the quantities of a product offered for sale at various possible prices. So again, in both of these we're looking at various price quantity combinations. So let's first look at demand in this context of the market for goods and services. Here we have the price quantity combinations. Here we have all the various prices. In this particular schedule we have prices from $1 to $4, and over here we have the related quantities associated with each of these prices. So at $1, the consumers are willing and able to purchase 80 units of this particular good or service. At $2, the consumers are willing and able to purchase 60 units, $3, 40 units, and at $4, 20 units. Now this particular relationship between price and quantity should be very familiar to us. Think about it. At low prices, consumers are willing and able to purchase higher quantities, but as the price increases, the amount that they're willing and able to purchase decreases. So this table or schedule here would be called the demand schedule, and we can graph that schedule, and we can place the price on the vertical axis and the quantity on the horizontal axis. So let's go ahead and put our prices that we have there, our various prices on the vertical axis, and our associated and related quantities on the horizontal axis. And we see that at $1 we can graph that the quantity will be 80 units. And we can do the same for each of the other prices. $2, 60 units, $3, 40 units, and at $4, 20 units. Now if we connect these lines here and show on this graph all the possible combinations of price and quantity for this particular range of prices and quantity, we have this line here or what's called the demand curve. Now this demand curve here, again, is looking at all the different price quantity combinations in this particular range. Notice the schedule here is only demonstrated on the graph by these red dots, while this curve here, or this line here, is looking at all the possible combinations, so that for, let's say, a price of $3.50, the quantity on this demand curve would be, let's say, 30. So for purposes of our illustration, we're going to be looking at this demand curve, and this table or schedule over here is simply showing discrete quantities, discrete combinations along this particular curve. Now, as I've mentioned, as price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. And this is what's called the law of demand. And that's simply stating that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. As price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. And as the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. So that's why this particular line here, this demand curve, has a negative slope. It's showing this inverse relationship here, which we call the law of demand. Now you may have noticed I've been stating something called quantity demanded. There's a difference between demand and quantity demanded. Quantity demanded are each of these individual quantities here. So 80 would be a quantity demanded. 60 would be a quantity demanded. And that's different from demand. Demand is the whole relationship. Demand is the entire relationship, all of these particular combinations. Now, sometimes in the media, when you're listening to newscasters, or you're listening to commentators on the TV, they may say that if price increases from $2 to $3, that demand decreased from 60 to 40. That's not technically true. What's happened is, if holding everything else constant, if we say that price goes from $2 to $3, then their quantity demanded goes from 60 units to 40 units. The demand hasn't changed. You see, demand is the entire relationship there. And if we change prices, as we change prices, we move along this demand curve here from one point in the demand curve to another point. And so as we change prices here, we're simply moving from one quantity to another one. And each of these quantities, again, are called quantity demanded, while the whole schedule there is demand. So if we're changing prices, and because the quantity is changing because of the change in price, we're simply moving within the relationship of demand. Now, we can change demand by changing these price quantity combinations. Suppose we have these particular quantities. Something happens such that the consumers no longer choose the previous set of quantities for each of these prices, but now the new set of quantities. So that for $1, instead of at a price of $1, the consumers no longer are willing and able to purchase 80 units, but they're willing to purchase 100 units. Suppose their consumers' income increased, and so at a price of $1, consumers are willing and able to purchase more of a particular item. And so in this particular case, the whole relationship has changed. We're not just moving within a particular relationship, moving within a particular schedule, or moving along a particular curve. We've changed the whole relationship now. We've changed these combinations. And so this is how it would look with a schedule. We can also depict that on the graph, where the whole demand curve may change. And so this curve now is depicting, or really showing, this particular combination. Or again, really, this demand curve is showing all possible combinations, and this schedule here are just points along this particular curve. And so when we're talking about a change in demand, we're talking about a change in this particular schedule, this relationship. Graphically, we're talking about a change in the curve. A change in demand means that the line is going to be changing or shifting, while a change in the quantity demanded simply means we're moving along the curve. Let's look at market demand. Market demand is simply the summation of the individual demands that make up the market. So here we have the various prices, and here we have the quantities that I listed before, 80, 60, 40, 20, and this is the quantity demanded by the market. Now the market may be comprised of, let's say, 3 individuals. So for the first individual, this right here, this relationship here shows the demand of the first individual. This individual, what this demand schedule here is showing us is that at a price of $1, this individual would be willing and able to purchase 20 units of this particular good. At a price of $2, 15 units of the particular good, and so forth. And here we have another individual. While this individual is willing and able to purchase 20 units at $1, this individual is willing and able to purchase 30 units at $1. So perhaps this particular individual likes this product more than this individual. Perhaps this individual is wealthier than this individual. Whatever the reason, at a price of $1, this individual's quantity demanded, the second individual's quantity demanded is higher than the quantity demanded for individual 1. And so here we have demand schedules for 3 different individuals. We have 3 different demands here. And the market demand would simply be the summation of each of these quantities demanded at each of the various prices. So at $1, this individual is willing and able to purchase 20, this one 30, this one 30. So for the whole market, for all 3 together, we simply add the 20, the 30, and the 30 and get the 80. We can see that graphically. Let's put the graph down here for this first individual, and let's concentrate for simplicity, not looking at all the various prices and quantity combinations, but just looking at a price of $3. This particular individual at a price of $3 wants to consume or wants to purchase 10 units of this particular good. The second individual at a price of $3 has a quantity demanded of 15, while the third individual at a price of $3 has a quantity demanded of 15 also. We add these together and we arrive at the market demand. So looking at this particular price alone at a price of $3, the market has a quantity demanded of 40, and that 40 comes from the 10 plus the 15 plus the 15.